Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight at the Nasdaq-100 index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed right here on the Nasdaq stock market. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining me this Tuesday afternoon, we have Shawn Cruz, Joining me is Shawn Cruz, Manager of Trader Services at TD Ameritrade, to discuss levels of the Nasdaq-100 VOLQ, the semiconductor space. He's also going to preview Netflix earnings for us. And Shawn, let's jump into your first couple of charts here, looking at fresh levels in the NDX and getting some clues with the Nasdaq Volatility Index.
Yeah, and we talked about this last week, Jill, where it looked like after an incredible run up, you should almost expect maybe a little bit of consolidation and choppiness sideways. And we were looking at some price levels. Two of those levels are still holding, the level down around 13,700. I still think the level right around, I'd say slightly above, we're at around 13,840. That can become an interesting focal point for the Nasdaq-100 to pivot around moving forward. But then on the upside, we now have a little bit better idea of maybe an upside level to monitor as resistance, or a potential level to indicate we are breaking out. And that is that level up around 13,980, 13,984. So some levels to watch here moving forward as we do chop back and forth sideways here. I don't think it should be too big of a surprise to see, after some of the recent run-ups, to see this sort of volatility as the market sort of settles out at this level.
All right, and let's take a look at the semiconductor space.
Yeah, I think looking at the semiconductor space, it actually, you're still seeing the historical volatility sort of pull back here. It remains in that downtrend. There has been a little bit of a pullback here lately, but I am looking at the level it's really almost trading at right now that was previous resistance, now serving as support. And that's that level for the stock semiconductor index at around 3,118. So I think it's interesting to watch this level. If you're looking at VOLQ to sort of get a feel for where uncertainty is out of investors just based off the options market, we're sort of in a little bit of a middle range here, almost no man's land. We're elevated from that level we were watching where it seemed like the Nasdaq-100 volatility had pulled back to and was moving sideways as we had those large gains, but we're not quite popping up to those higher levels where we saw a lot of intraday volatility out of the Nasdaq either. I'm watching that 22 level to see if we can get VOLQ to pull back below that 22 level. I think that would be an indication that some of that uncertainty or fear is starting to abate a little bit, and you could maybe start looking at some of those semiconductors to maybe hold this level, could make an interesting entry point, or just the Nasdaq-100 to maybe start moving higher and going towards that previous resistance level we had just mentioned.
And finally, let's wrap up here with Netflix earnings, of course, the big one to watch in the Nasdaq-100.
It is, and I think it's going to be very interesting for Netflix because they had some incredible user growth last year. They acknowledge that they are expecting that to have a little bit of a pull forward effect. But for this quarter coming up, they're looking at about 6 million new subscribers. Analysts are expecting about 6.45 million new subscribers and about 7.1 billion in revenue, which would equate to $2.97 for earnings per share. It is going to be important forward-looking to hear about updates from, say, the recent deal they just signed with Sony Studios. I also think pricing is going to be something that maybe investors and analysts are going to be monitoring. They've made some pricing changes here in the US, but now maybe they can look at some of the foreign markets that they have been developing over the years past to see if they are in a spot where maybe they can start increasing some prices there. So there's certainly a lot to look forward to in this Netflix earning, and the market is pricing in about a $30 range in either direction for them to trade in after the earnings report. So somewhere between 580 and above 520 is where the market is looking for a post-earnings price range. So it will be interesting to see how the market reacts to whatever news it is we get out of Netflix. But subscriber growth and pricing, I think, are going to be the two key elements here.
All right, Shawn, appreciate the update as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq.